The rain had stopped, but the storm still lingered inside him. Jack Steele Morgan, a Hells Angels biker with more scars than memories he could count, rode down the empty dirt road, his Harley's engine growling through the silence of the wilderness. He wasn't running from the law this time, he was running from himself. The night before he'd gotten into another fight at a bar in some forgotten town, and though he'd walked away, something inside him felt broken. The farther he rode, the more the world around him seemed to fade, until he saw it. A small, crooked cabin in the distance, half swallowed by the forest, its windows dark and lifeless. But what caught his attention wasn't the cabin, it was the faint movement on the porch, the fragile silhouette of someone sitting alone in the fading light. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the power of humanity to heal even the darkest hearts, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, because what happened next is a story about how two broken souls found hope when the world had already given up on them. Jack slowed his bike, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, and turned off the ignition. The silence that followed was eerie, the kind that makes you feel like the world's holding its breath. He stepped off the bike, his boots heavy with mud, and took a closer look. Sitting on the porch steps was a young woman, barefoot, her clothes torn, and a trail of dried blood running down her arm. Her eyes were hollow, like she hadn't slept in days, and for a moment, Jack thought she might be a ghost. But when she blinked and looked up, he saw something real: pain, fear, and the faintest flicker of life. The old cabin behind her looked abandoned. Broken windows, ivy crawling up its sides, the porch half collapsed. But the woman, she was real. Jack approached slowly, his instinct as a biker to trust no one, warring against something softer inside him that he hadn't felt in years: compassion. He asked her name, but she didn't answer. She just stared at him like she couldn't tell if he was real or part of another nightmare. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered one word: help. Jack didn't think twice. He tore off his leather jacket, the one with the Hells Angels patch that had once made people step aside in fear, and wrapped it around her. Inside the cabin, he found an old first aid kit and patched her up as best he could. The gash on her shoulder wasn't deep enough to kill her, but it told a story of someone who had been running, maybe from someone worse than himself. That night, Jack stayed in the cabin, sitting by the fire he built from broken wood planks. The woman, her name was Emily, he later learned, barely spoke, but her silence said everything. He didn't press her. He'd seen enough of life's cruelty to know that words often made wounds bleed again, so he just sat there, watching the flames dance, thinking about all the times he'd been lost, and how maybe, just maybe, finding this cabin wasn't an accident. Days passed. Emily began to talk. Not much, but enough for Jack to understand that she had run away from something terrible. A man she thought she loved had turned her life into a prison, and when she finally escaped, she had nowhere to go. The woods had been her refuge until the pain and exhaustion brought her to this forgotten cabin. Jack listened, his rough hands clenched into fists, anger burning beneath the surface, not at her, but at the world that could break someone so fragile. The two of them were opposites in every way. He was a man who had lived by the code of the road: loyalty, brotherhood, survival. She was a soul searching for safety in a world that had offered her none. But somehow their brokenness fit together like two shattered pieces of the same glass. Every morning, Jack fixed what he could around the cabin: the porch steps, the windows, the roof, while Emily gathered berries, cleaned, and began to smile again. Slowly, the cabin that had once been lifeless began to feel like a home. Yet Jack knew this peace couldn't last forever. He was still a man with a past, a biker with enemies, with a name that carried weight in dark corners of the country. He had done things he wasn't proud of, things that haunted his dreams. But for the first time in years, he felt something different: the need to be better, to protect, not destroy. One evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, painting the sky with fire, Emily came to sit beside him on the porch. She told him she was scared, that the man who hurt her might come looking. Jack turned to her, his voice quiet but certain, and told her that as long as he was alive, no one would ever lay a hand on her again. And he meant it, because somewhere along that lonely road, in that forgotten place, he'd found something worth living for, and maybe even worth dying for. Weeks turned into months. The cabin became their sanctuary. Emily began painting again, turning the inside walls into stories of hope and rebirth. Jack, who had never believed in redemption, found himself learning what it meant to care again. Sometimes he'd ride his Harley down to the nearby town for supplies, and the locals would whisper when they saw the Hells Angels patch. But he didn't care. He wasn't that man anymore, not completely. Then one morning, a letter arrived. It was from one of his old brothers from the club, a warning that some people were still looking for him. The road he'd left behind hadn't forgotten. Jack knew he had to make a choice, keep running or stand his ground. That night he told Emily everything, about his past, his mistakes, the things he'd done. She didn't flinch. She just took his hand and said that people aren't what they've done, they're what they choose to become. When the danger finally came, it wasn't the roar of engines or the echo of violence that defined it. It was Jack's choice to protect, not destroy, by standing for something. Pure, he let go of the darkness that had followed him for years, and in doing so he found his freedom. The next morning, as the first light touched the cabin, Jack looked at Emily and realized that he wasn't lost anymore. The road had brought him here for a reason, not to find trouble, but to find peace. And for the first time in his life, he felt it. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that even the darkest souls can find light, please like, share, and subscribe. Let this story remind us all that redemption isn't found on a map. It's found in the choices we make and the hearts we heal. Comment below, what would you have done if you were Jack, kept riding, or stayed to rebuild what was lost? Because sometimes the road to forgiveness begins where we least expect it, in the heart of an abandoned cabin, with a wounded stranger and a second chance.